Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Ballou-Aares, CEO of the Leadership Now project, and I'm thrilled to be here in Mackinac today for a star-studded panel on ensuring Michigan's competitiveness by supporting safe and secure elections. I'd like to quickly introduce Leadership Now and how we think about the link between economic competitiveness and election security, and then we'll go on to our panel. So Leadership Now is a membership organization of business leaders across the country who believe that strong democracy is critical to a thriving economy. We work to influence policy and support and invest in leaders through our national membership of informed, activated business leaders. Our membership is across the country. We have members in more than 37 states and 8 chapters, and we're working to grow our membership and partnerships here in Michigan, including today with the Detroit Chamber, which we're thrilled to partner with on this session. As we look at where we focus as an organization, 2 key areas, people and policy. And in 2026, we're focused on building strong centrist leadership across the country and supporting candidates in that area, and also building pipelines of new talent for appointed position in states around the country. Second, on policy, we've just launched a business plan for America, which I'll talk about in a moment, and you have printouts on your tables. We look at risks to U.S. competitiveness and the rule of law, including ensuring strong, legitimate elections as part of the foundations of our democracy and economy. Finally, our business plan for America sets out that we launched just 2 weeks ago, really seeks to set out a framework for both how we can be competitive as an economy, support broad-based growth, and underpin that with strong institutions. So you'll see we have America's Talent Advantage as our first pillar, where we look across the impact of AI in the workforce and immigration. Second is our pillar around growth and affordability, which focuses on housing, energy, and healthcare, and how can we make those accessible and affordable to more Americans. Third is U.S. global leadership and its critical role in our competitiveness, both in terms of technology and supply chains. Fourth is a government that earns and builds trust. And that's where we really look at all of these foundational rule of law issues, including at elections. And fifth is ensuring fiscal strength for our country, both from a tax perspective and a debt perspective. And today we're double clicking on this 4th pillar, right? A government that earns trust and delivers. And when we look at elections in particular, of course, as we're coming into a big election year in 2026, there's 3 ways we see it as relevant to competitiveness for businesses and for state economies at the whole. First is the risk of market volatility with uncertainty around legitimacy of elections, uncertainty about even when and where to vote, potential for operational disruption around elections. And third, we look at reputational harm, as both for government, business, and the U.S. as a whole, as people look to us for a robust and strong democratic process. Our panelists will talk a lot more about the actual process and how it's being managed in Michigan and what we can do to strengthen it. But I just wanted to share a bit of a framework for how we look at elections and election risk across the country. So we think about 3 pieces: before Election Day, during Election Day, after Election Day. And kind of pre-Election Day, the risks are really related to disinformation, election security funding being reduced, anything that makes it harder to administer a trusted election. On the day of elections, we look at things like threats to poll workers, deployment of, in some cases, there's been discussion of deployment of ICE or the National Guard near polling places. And then post-elections, the risk is really around certification and the overall election counting process. I will say that these risks are rare, but they are things that we see the preparation for, both from state governments and the business community, being really critical to resulting in ultimately safe, secure, and trusted elections. So I'll share a brief video from leaders across the country talking about this issue, and then we'll go on to the panel. Video queued up.
It's not politics, it's values. It's important to participate, to build the community and the country that you want to live in. It's America's 250th anniversary. For 250 years, we've built a system where people choose their leaders.
We built our country on the rule of law, competition, and stability.
That's made it possible to build our businesses.
None of that works without accessible, secure elections.
On America's 250th anniversary, the best thing we can do is
stand up for our democracy and keep this system strong.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really thrilled to welcome up our panelists. And I'd like to say that, at a moment where we do see a lot of polarization and division, I'm so thrilled to have three individuals who I'm certain have not agreed on many things over the years, but are here on this issue, and I think find a lot of common ground in strengthening our system as a whole. So I'll start with, of course, Sandy Baruah, who you all know, this president and CEO of the Detroit Chamber and our host today. Before joining the Chamber, Sandy served in the Bush administration as the administrator of the Small Business Administration and Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Please join us. Thanks, Sandy. And of course, we have Jocelyn Benson, our Secretary of State here in Michigan. She's overseen the state's elections through one of the most contentious periods in American politics. She received the JFK Profile and Courage Award and the Presidential Citizen Medal for her work defending the democratic process. And her recent book last year, The Purposeful Warrior, tells that story. Please join us, Jocelyn. Finally, Peter Meijer is a former congressman from Michigan's 3rd District, now co-founder and head of strategy at the New Industrial Corporation. And before Congress, he served as an armed intelligence officer in Iraq and an investor. Welcome, Peter. Thanks again to all of you for being here. So I think it goes without saying this is a big election year in Michigan. Every seat on the legislature is on the ballot. We have the governor's race. We have the congressional races and a key Senate race as well. And it's happening in a moment of real policy uncertainty, from tariff disruptions to geopolitical tensions to questions about the stability of our institutions and elections. So I want to start first with this policy uncertainty and what it means for the business environment, which I'm sure is top of mind for you, Sandy. I noticed that you have worked with Harvard's U.S. Competitiveness Project over the years. Their work has also inspired some of our work about the importance of reliable institutions and policy for competitiveness. And I just wonder if you could help connect the dots a bit. How is the uncertain policy environment, including related to elections, impacting Michigan business, and how is the Chamber responding?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you to Leadership Now, and it's such a pleasure to be with my friends Jocelyn and Peter. I think, Peter, you're part of a Bee Gees tribute band, too, aren't you?
Post-congressional career.
Nice. My wife and I say, Peter's on TV again. It looks great. Anyway, welcome, everyone. So I'd say a couple things. First of all, the way Harvard HBS talks about it, it's the strength of the commons. And, the commons are the institutions, both public, civic, private, that have really been the building blocks of our society. And if we don't have that strong foundation, and elections, trust in elections is certainly a big piece of that, then the rest of it falls apart. And frankly, we're starting to see those cracks now. From a business perspective, uncertainty, if it's policy uncertainty or frankly, the threats to democracy, the threats in the stability of democracy, that leads to an unstable, uncertain investment environment. Why is America still the place that companies from all around the planet want to come and invest? It is the strength of our systems. It is the strength of our commons. The rules of the rule of law, the predictability in our justice system, the regularity of our elections, and I will say that every last election has had more integrity and has been stronger than the one prior to it, even the ones that some have questioned. These are all critical strengths for the business community. And I'll give an analogy, and many of you are living this now, but the lack of clarity around our trade and tariff policies has really disproportionately negatively impacted Michigan and our auto and mobility industry. And that has really thwarted investment. So lack of stability, lack of business growth.
Right. Building on that, even with the uncertainty, of course, Michigan has a lot going on economically, a lot of positive direction. And Jocelyn, from your vantage point, how is the state government working to reduce some of the uncertainty, including related to elections and beyond?
Well, you need strong state leaders to ensure that stability, especially when you're not seeing that at the federal level, when you're seeing chaos and when you're seeing confusion, when you're seeing decisions that are hurting our economy and then changing day to day. Strong state leaders can help stand in the brink and be prepared to right the ship no matter what and deliver confidence and certainty. You can't have a healthy economy if you don't have a healthy democracy. Because without a healthy democracy, you don't have a government that's working well, electing leaders that are accountable to everyone, and through that accountability, delivering results and improving our economy, improving our education system, and all the rest. And the critical thing we need right now in states around the nation are people to work together in a way that is data-driven and solution-oriented to provide everyone with confidence and clarity and certainty on our economy, on our democracy in this moment. And over the last several years, administering democracy at a time where there has been similar confusion and chaos at the federal level in terms of our election system, we've worked hard in the Department of State to, among all that we do, and my team knows this, I say every day, our job is to provide the citizens of Michigan with the confidence, the certainty, and the clarity that they need to vote, to have confidence in our elections, to know no matter what you're hearing at the federal level, everything's going to be okay right here in Michigan. And I think that same type of leadership translates to economic stability in this moment as well. And it's why it's so important, I think, in every state in this nation to have leaders who will work together across aisle, across the spectrum, to provide that clarity, that confidence, that certainty in this moment where we're not seeing it at the federal level. And I think the states that do that the most are the ones that will see their economy continue to grow, even in this chaotic time.
Congressman Meijer, you demonstrated principled leadership in a variety of challenging times and have talked about our duties to the Constitution, not tribal partisanship. And as we head towards November, what lessons should leaders take from the past several cycles on how to respond to uncertainty and misinformation, especially when it's coming from prominent sources?
I think the number one thing that businesses should do is not over-rotate on what the passion of the moment may be. And we've seen this with businesses wading into the culture wars and then having to, realize that they or maybe swimming without some swim trunks when the water changed and the tide went the other way. Businesses should be thinking and focusing on the long term. And politics, sadly, is focused exclusively on the short term. Whether it's a quarterly earnings report, publicly traded companies, and I think this is one of the differences between West and Southeast Michigan, is that long-term focus. But when it comes to businesses trying to figure out that environment, it's better to listen. It's better to be patient and to realize that if you are focused on whatever is in the 24-hour news cycle, not only will people not remember that a month from now, they won't remember it a day from now. I mean, I've been shocked at how the news cycle has compressed. And so what may feel like to a company that hasn't experienced a significant amount of public attention, what may feel like the world is coming down on you, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but take solace. A week from now, folks won't remember. If you give it a beat, they will if you establish a position that you're not ready to defend in the long term.
I appreciate the focus on the long term. Our Constitution seems like a good long-term framework that's probably not going away, I hope, anytime soon. Well, let's talk a little bit about what do we do about the current context. And I think we know that even though there's been risks over the years to elections, Michigan has run very safe and secure elections. And so that election confidence comes from multiple sectors working together. So I'm interested, Secretary Benson, while you've overseen elections at contentious moments, you've talked about the unprecedented wave of unrelenting harassments and threats that you've faced, that election workers have faced. And just want to get a sense of this November, what you're seeing as the risks. How are you preparing, and what role do you think the business community can play?
Well, I think partnerships are key. And when, as Sandy was saying earlier, I'm really proud that, as you mentioned, every election that we've seen over the last several cycles has been more transparent, more secure, and we've had higher turnout than ever before. Back to back to back, the highest turnout elections in our state's history leading to 2024, where we had the highest turnout election ever, and lead the nation in youth vote turnout and a number of other metrics. So all that to say is we've been able to succeed and grow our democracy in the midst of these challenging times, in the midst of a lack of support at the federal level, in the midst of sometimes even sort of falsehoods and attacks at the federal level that have been targeting the people of democracy, which is our strongest player. We talk about how our election workers are MVPs in democracy, and truly that's the case. If you don't have an election worker and a local clerk in a community across Michigan who's actually working every day to ensure that the wheels of democracy are working, then things do fall apart. And so it's been particularly challenging to me. The threats on me I can handle. I'm tough. I'm a military family. But at the same time, when you're threatening your neighbors, people who are teachers in your community, nurses, others who are simply just showing up to work on our democracy, that's really, to me, antithetical to who we're supposed to be as a nation. And so part of the work has meant protecting our election workers. We passed laws to make it a crime to threaten election workers and in their line of duty and the like. But at the same time, I think our best antidote to those challenges, and frankly, the reason why ultimately our democracy has thrived even amidst them, is because the people of our state across the aisle in every community have stepped up, even with turnover, to be election workers, to serve as clerks, to ensure we're keeping those wheels moving through the strength of the people and communities all across the state, even in the midst of those threats. And it gives me great faith and hope that that is how we can see, even in chaotic times, whether it's our economy or our democracy, our state continue to thrive. When our people stay engaged, when they have that trust in our government, when they believe that by participating they can help make things better, which we know is true, then we can actually create a system that even in the most chaotic, uncertain times at the federal level still holds and still grows. And that's really been the story of our democracy over these last several years.
If I could maybe
go ahead.
just jump in here a bit. So obviously, the way social media works, and we all are familiar with this, that the misinformation, the mistruths, leads to a lot of the threats of violence or even violence. The business community, leaders like you, leaders in trusted nonprofit institutions, really do play a critical role, if not so much in the public square, but with your own employees, to help bat down some of these mistruths. Because poll after poll, you can look at the Edelman Trust Index, you can look at our statewide polling that we do with the Glenn Gariff Group. Your employer is always amongst the top, if not the top, source for trusted information, not just with elections, but other, things that are going on in society. So to kind of build on what Peter said a few minutes ago, businesses do have to be really careful about how they, engage in the public square. But sometimes it's really important to, when the public square is engaging in your business, make sure you're talking to your employees about what's happening. So, because they are looking to you for guidance and clarity, if not necessarily to take a position.
I think if I could add, I don't know but it also helps create that certainty, that consistency, that clarity, that confidence that's been our North Star in running elections over these last several years. That if these institutions, these pillars of our communities, whether they be academic institutions or businesses, local businesses, larger businesses, if you all as stable representatives of the community are also helping to communicate how to provide stability for democracy, that's how we continue to provide stability during these times. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've seen, frankly, in 2024. I know when we partnered with the Chamber to ensure that leaders' voices all throughout the state were equipped with trusted information that could cut through the noise you're seeing on social media and simply say, no, that's not true. Here's where you find the accurate information. And sometimes just that, and even just to the audience of people who work in your corporation or for employees, that can be effective and one of the most effective ways to cut through the noise and the chaos in turbulent times. And it's, again, part of the reasons why these partnerships have helped us grow our democracy in this moment, even with the challenges we face at the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, I wanted to pick up a little bit more on Peter.
I think Peter wanted to jump in.
Oh, sorry, Peter.
No,
yes, I was going to tee off of your earlier point, but maybe you will already, so please.
Well, and a little bit of a through line to some of that. I mean, I think of the folks after 2016 who thought that Russia installed Donald Trump by Facebook ads, and that the thing happening in the voodoo of social media that took things out of the hands of kind of the voters in 2020 was things happening due to COVID and some of that isolation, and combined with the way that you had social distancing and limitations and who could be in poll centers, the more things are abstracted and removed away from the people making those, the voters, that breeds a sense of mistrust. I saw a lot of folks who had concerns after 2020 then get engaged, become poll watchers in 2022, and all of a sudden what they thought was something that was distant and unknown, they get firsthand experience of, and that helps root a sense of confidence. The more something can be done locally, the more something can be done within a community, the person sitting in the pew next to you, you're gonna have a lot more faith in than the person's on the other side of the country. And so it's a lot harder for that to take root when you have a base of knowledge and trust, when the folks who are operating, when it's your local county clerk who's explaining how things are going that you've known for 20 years, that's a person you trust. And when you can have that sense of rootedness, it helps drain the water from an area that otherwise could give birth to fetid conspiracy.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I think I wanted to also build a little on the point you made earlier, Peter, about kind of business, trying to calibrate how it engages, right? And perhaps going too far and we're going to jump in on everything. And then I would suggest maybe the other extreme of we're not going to say anything about anything, including things that are really bad for our business, like tariffs, right? And I feel like we're kind of, what we're seeing with our members and with companies is they're kind of trying to calibrate, right? Where do I find the right ground for engaging? Where do I weigh in publicly or in the courts or within my employee base? And so I'm interested, we've seen the kind of things that really touch on the core of rule of law, economic competitiveness as a place where companies are getting more comfortable weighing in. I mean, tariffs obviously being an obvious one, or the Fed chair or otherwise. But I'm wondering, Sandy, related to elections, are you seeing kind of best practices in your membership around engagement, whether it's with employees or otherwise, that you think other companies can replicate?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say not a lot, to be honest. I think, very much to Peter's point, some companies, engage when the public square comes to visit their company, if you will, with their employees. Some don't. One of the things that the secretary and the Detroit Regional Chamber and others were working on was to get employers to share facts with their employees, like when can you vote? Right? When do the polls open? When can you vote early? How do you vote absentee? What's required? What to look out for? In terms of election fraud, and then encourage. We've been encouraging, as the Detroit Regional Chamber, that employers give time off to vote on election day. Should you be one of those people who want to go to the polls on election day? I grew up in the state of Oregon. I haven't been in a polling booth in 35 years. Not quite
Every
sure.
time we talk about elections, Sandy brings this up. Every time. Yeah. All mail voting. Yes.
Yeah, all mail-in voting, right? And it's like I'd much rather vote with a cup of coffee at the kitchen table than stand in line and have an awkward conversation with my neighbor who we have a fence dispute with. So anyway, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I think employers are doing that, but I think it's relatively limited.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly more that can be done. I would sort of put it in 3 categories. Number 1 is that proactive information. Here's what you need to know to vote. And I should mention there's a bifurcation between like issues and the actions of voting. And what we really need employers and business leaders, academic institutions to do more and focus on is that action of voting. You can do that without having to weigh in on the issue of the day or even a political campaign or a particular challenging argument that's being, you don't have to get involved and tangled up in any of that. You can just talk about proactively, this is what you need to know to vote, to participate, and it's important that you do, period. The second track is this is where you go if you have questions, because that's empowering people to be critical consumers of information in this moment is obviously something we all have a responsibility to do, and in that regard, encouraging people to know where to go. Your local clerk, michigan.gov/vote, elsewhere, things like that can actually be very helpful as we evolve in this era of misinformation over these next 5 months in particular. And the third track, I think, is engaging in involvement, meaning sign up to be a poll worker, certainly voting, but there's things you can do because engagement can go beyond just voting, but actually participating in our elections. And what we found across the board is we have recruited tens of thousands of new poll workers over the last several years, is that has been, as I was mentioning earlier, one of the biggest antidotes to this era of misinformation that you're in. Just simply saying to someone who still has all the information, knows where to ask, and is still skeptical or doesn't have faith in the system that they should have faith in, to say, well, join us, be a part of it, be an election worker. And that's been one of the most effective ways that people can, through their actions, just see firsthand what's real and then spread that truthful information, that trusted information to their colleagues, to their friends. If we do all of that, and again, that's been in some ways the secret sauce here in Michigan as to how we've been able to grow our democracy even in these turbulent times, we can apply that across the nation in different scenarios as well. But it's equipping with information, knowing who to ask for more information, and then knowing how to get involved firsthand and have that firsthand experience that empowers you even more to be that voice for truth, for sanity in these challenging times. And I think employers can encourage all 3 of those things.
We're going to open it up pretty soon for questions. So think about your questions. I did, Jocelyn, or Secretary Benson, sorry, want to ask, I think what we're all saying here is that there's a pretty united perspective, across all of you that this is something that Michigan as a state can handle. You can address the disinformation. You can ensure there's a safe and legitimate election. But are there risks that this audience should know about that, could happen at a national level or state level that, it seems that preparation is the best prevention. So is there anything that we should be more worried about as we go into the elections?
Yeah, well, I would say 2 things. First, I think it's, safe and secure elections are not a nice to have thing, it's a necessity. And in that regard, this work that we're talking about, it is important. It is something that uniquely is necessary and that the business and academic community can uniquely do. And it's a necessity in this moment. So I'm here to say we need you. We need your help. We need you to be a part of it. And because those of you have been a part of it for so many years, it's one of the reasons why our democracy has been able to thrive. Our elections have been able to had gone from ranked being 31st in the nation to number 2 for elections because of that involvement. And so now as we look to not just this year with midterms, but the presidential in 2028, I would say, Paul Tagliabue is one of my mentors, great friend. I remember he called me. We worked on this project. He called me on January 7th, 2021. And he said, I fear what we've witnessed on January 6th was not the end, but the beginning of a multi-year effort to try to delegitimize not just our democracy, but our way of life. And we need to start thinking in those terms. And dear Commissioner Tagliabue was accurate because as we look to 26 and 28, I have not seen a diminution of the challenges. I have seen an escalation. And I have seen an escalation that affects our economy, that affects our education system, and in terms of how are we preparing our young people, not just for the jobs of tomorrow, but also to inherit our democracy. That's on all of us to do, and it is a necessity that we do it if we're going to thrive, not just as a state, but as a nation. So what the challenges are, and that what we're preparing for, are everything from the physical potential disruption of elections, obviously the spread of misinformation, and overall just people kind of being exhausted and checking out. That, to me, is the greatest threat. Because as I mentioned earlier, if people are our strength, if the people of Michigan are the antidote, if truth and the people of Michigan telling the truth and engaging in our democracy, having rightly placed faith in our elections, if that's the antidote to this moment, then the worst thing that could happen as the external threats potentially escalate is that we give up and say, you know what, this is too hard, let's just let it go. And so what I've been trying to say, frankly, for the last several years, particularly after 2024, is the worst thing we can do in this moment is check out and say, we've been working so hard, I'm tired, or whatever excuse you might have. And that's why we're having this conversation here today, to say this is the moment where all the business leaders and academic institutions that have helped us grow our democracy and through that secure our economy over these last several years, this is the moment that we lean in and do more. Because whether they are physical threats, whether they are the potential, and it's illegal, by the way, for the president to send troops in to interfere with our elections, illegal. You need a state leader to stand up and say that, as I've been as Secretary of State, and say, I'll see you in court if you try to do that. And every time I should mention that we have had our challenges at the federal level, I've simply said, we'll see you in court, and we have won, and we'll continue to do that. So state leaders can be and must be those critical guardrails, but we can't do it alone. We have not grown our democracy alone. We need all of you helping us, staying engaged and being a part of that work too. If we do that, and again, that's what's great about our state, right? That's who we are. We work together to get things done. If we do that, then no matter what threats come our way in 26, 28 and beyond, with strong state leaders determined to follow the law and ensure that truth and democracy rules the day, and citizens committed to staying engaged and doing that work too at every level, then we thrive, we get that certainty, we create our own certainty ourselves in its midst of uncertainty. And that, to me, is both what democracy is supposed to be all about, power of the people, but it's also how we get through this challenging moment.
And declining civic education in our schools is playing a huge role in that, and just the lack of really aggressive critical thinking skills. Because if you lose those two things, then it's a lot easier for the misinformation to take root.
Agree.
Well, I feel like I can't allow a business conference event to go without mentioning AI. So, Sandy, I think you teed up a little bit of that question, right? As how in a moment where things are moving quickly, technology is changing, there's fear. Any more you can say about how business and government can work together now? Civic education, obviously, you mentioned. And what is it going to take to get through this time of change in technology in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously AI is a transformative tool and technology, and obviously it is going to take a partnership. I mean, business can't just do it alone, and government doesn't have the skills or the speed to regulate it so finely that it'll be responsive without killing our competitiveness as a nation and as industry. The one thing I will say, and Peter, I'd be super curious about your comments. I live in Michigan. I love Michigan. Michigan's my home, but like many of you, I travel a lot. I spent most of my life on the coasts, both the left coast and the right coast. And when I travel back to those areas, the conversation about AI isn't a conversation about AI. Most of the conversations that I'm in, AI is weaved into the conversation. It's kind of like part of the conversation. Here, I still fear that we have a conversation about, now we're going to talk about AI. And it kind of slaps me around each time. When I am traveling, it's like going, okay, I feel like we're behind. And because we're kind of approaching AI as a thing, as opposed to something that infuses everything. It's a little bit like, the early days of the internet. And it's like, wow, what is this insect? What is this bug? When we learned, very quickly that the internet just infused everything. So you don't have a conversation about the internet, you have a conversation that the internet's kind of woved into. So
I think that's right. Yeah, and Peter, I'm interested in your thoughts at the intersection of AI, governance, trust in our system. What do you think?
I'm actually super bullish on some elements of AI. I mean, I love watching on social media where somebody will post a claim and then be like, hey, Grok, is this true? And then sometimes they'll be like, oh, that wasn't the answer I was looking for. Okay, like it can all actually offer a really helpful balance in some places. Obviously, you have AI manipulation of videos. I mean, it's just a faster, more efficient Photoshop. The same people who are not to get into a generational thing, but I do find that, let's say, some social media consumers are a bit more highly attuned to what may be real and not real, and some just fall into a slop bucket and hit the like and smash the retweet. But there is a through line as well with just truth and integrity writ large. I mean, the politician who's going to lie to you about election is going to lie to you about, the risk of a data center, right? The folks who are lying about fracking are going to be lying about the next thing because they see political advantage. And I think the challenge is you can't have politics. Politics and honesty don't really exist in a happy equilibrium, and everything has become political because everything gets nationalized. There's a tension there with, and we see this on the data center side, with economic development, where inherently you can't go in and say, hey, I want to build a massive development and all your land is going to get much more expensive. Now please sell it to me. Then nothing will happen. At the same time, if you have projects that require that and there's a sense of mistrust generated because of the inherent necessity of the secrecy, then it sets people off on the wrong foot. So how do you strike that balance, I think, is very difficult. And it's an additional layer, and we saw this with some of the mega projects, pre-data center. And now, folks are more increasingly uncertain about how AI will impact their lives and their economic prospects. Some are massively excited because for the person who was without great counsel and expert advice and just couldn't call up somebody who could tell them the answer, well, now you have the history of the greatest minds of humanity sucked into a machine that's on your phone that can tell you something, that can get you over that problem, that can show you a new opportunity, that the person who can take advantage of that is just, strapped a rocket pad on their back. But the person who is used to going in and clocking at a job and doing a task that can easily be automated, that's going to become a source of deep economic unease. And I think, well, it is going to take a calibrated approach. It's going to take the confidence that, hey, you have a place in this future. It won't necessarily be as linear, but every significant industrial innovation over the course of humanity, yes, has had a short-term dislocative effect and a massive long-term economic boom that has been spread throughout society. And Sandy, to your point, if we look to Europe for inspiration on how to do that regulation, it's a great way of further widening and falling behind our potential prospects.
Yeah.
Yeah, a final question, just building on that, Secretary Benson, is at the core of all of this is trust in many ways, trust between citizens and their governments and business. And anything you can say about how in this moment of technology uncertainty, democracy uncertainty, et cetera, how you see that role of creating trust in government, which isn't always trusted, to navigate with society all of these changes.
Yeah, I mean, what we found, and what's one of the reasons I love my current job, is because I not just make sure the bones of democracy work, but we build trust by the other side of our office, which is, I run the DMV, so I'm very popular, obviously. But what we've been able to do in partnership with Meijer and other places that are out our state is show that government can actually make your life easier. We can save you time, we can save you money, and then show up when you need it and get out of the way when you don't, right? And that actually engenders trust, because if I see government as something that's made my life easier, because I no longer have to wait in line 7 hours to update the address on my driver's license, I can do it online or at a self-service station at a Meijer, then I start to believe it's something that can make my life better. And in that way, then I want to maybe participate in ensuring that we're a part of this community bond that we have, that government can help, I think, generate, especially at the local level, by building that confidence. It's certainly, you see it at the local level as well. When you see schools thriving or roads fixed and all the rest, then you start to believe and trust that your participation in your community can yield a better life for you, your family, and the rest. And so all of that, I think, is interconnected. I've certainly seen that firsthand in my current position. And so I think the opportunities now in the future means making sure government continues to work well, and we lead with investing in more opportunities for civic engagement, for to build those critical thinking skills, especially among our youngest citizens for the future as we go into these technological transformational times. If you have critical thinking skills, if you're a critical consumer of information, that's the best antidote as well to sort of the potential fears that many folks have around AI or other technological advancements. So I think there's more work we need to do to ensure, among other things, our education system here in Michigan is preparing our young people for the jobs and the democracy of tomorrow. But all of that, I think, the baseline of all of that, foundation of everything is a healthy democracy. The next layer of that is a government that works well, efficiently and effectively to improve your life. And then beyond that, transformational things that can improve our economy, our education system, and all the rest. That's how we become what I hope we can be, which is the economic engine of the Midwest. But we need all of those layers working together, building that trust, engaging citizens, knowing that if we do that, we activate our greatest superpower, the people of the state, to not just improve our democracy, but also improve our economy.
And there's a feedback loop there too. When you have government that is functioning poorly, and then folks say, okay, let's vote the bums out, and then the next bums, don't really change the status quo demonstrably. And after a certain amount of time, I mean, you get this sense of just stagnation, inertia, right? And I think this is where I'm a big believer in one of the challenges with having too much kind of wishy-washy talk or not enough sort of concrete action, like here's where we started, here's where we're ending. You lose a sense of consequence, and then that downstream of that sense of consequence is the sense that your vote actually matters. Doesn't matter if you have confidence your vote will be counted and registered. That is a baseline prerequisite. But if then your elected officials don't do anything with it or can't do anything with it, if your government is so ossified that your legislative branch has no powers because everything's been shifted to the executive, or you've been told that the Supreme Court is rigged, and so what's the point of even trusting these decisions? Right, all of that is of a piece, and to me, it starts with if you can get government to function well, to be accountable to the commitments that it makes. If that is sort of your core, then you are fertilizing the ground to actually have positive seeds rise up, and that is how you're going to get a public that feels like excited to vote because they see the potential for positive change, and rather than what we've seen in the past with hope and change 10 years later being, wait, that happened?
Yes, results sounds like a good baseline. The former management consultant in me is always looking for some good KPIs. And
I would say that's another way that business leaders can and have been really influential, not just in our state, but nationally, in helping push government to be result-oriented. I mean, obviously, that's why we come to Mackinac every year, to talk about those results that we want to see and move the needle. But that accountability can also come from the community itself, from the business community, of the academic community, from the people. And I think that helps then move the needle, create results. Creating results and streamlining government creates a healthy democracy. It's all a feedback loop. But again, the thing that inspires me the most and gives me the most hope of all of this, that we can build trust, that we can grow our economy, is the strength of of an engaged citizenry, an informed and engaged citizenry. That's the ballgame. And so I think if we're all committed to that, whether it manifests itself in participating in our elections or our economy or other things, that informed, engaged citizenry can build an economic engine and a strong democracy that can continue to make Michigan a model for the nation, as we have been in many ways in the past.
Awesome. Well, you all are making me hopeful. We have time for some Q&A from the audience. And I know there should be a mic. There's a mic over there.
I think we have a couple floating around here.
There we go.
Hello, Joe LaRusso, Mayor of Farmington, Michigan. Curious about your thoughts about how you'd advise business leaders that have their own perceptual barriers, or have their own culture problems, or have their own issues with their workforce, perceiving them some kind of way. Do they have the kind of trust that you're talking about to actually move the needle on some of these things when they're also struggling with ossification of corporate structure or culture problems with their workforce, stability in their workforce, and trust?
Great question.
I don't know if you want advice from politicians on that. Right on.
We're all kindred spirits here.
No, I mean, to me, you can never be wrong in defaulting to a sense of humility, and just being willing to listen more than you're speaking, coming from a point of, even though I know somebody may not agree with me, at least, giving them the respect to hear them out and come issue those, be able to resolve some of those tensions. I mean, at every institution I've been a part of, I mean, just being able to, again, you may not get somebody to agree with you. You may turn them from a hard oppose to a soft oppose, or from a soft oppose to a neutral, but even taking that time, paying that respect, I think in any business situation, folks certainly understand that not every decision is going to go their way, especially when they're subordinate, but at least understanding that their feedback has been listened to, even if it is not acted upon. To me, I mean, that is just a release valve for the pressure buildup that can lead to greater and greater unease and frustration.
Yeah, I agree. I think because listening, approaching it that way, communicates your voice matters. It creates a sense of autonomy, of power, of agency that builds trust, even if it hasn't been there before. So I think that's what I found as well. That just listening, but through that communicating, respect, your voice matters. What you have to say matters so much that I want you to participate in democracy. I think it actually encouraging employees and others to participate in elections, even if they disagree with you politically, or they're not going to, or whatever. It actually, I think, is a great tool to build trust, to show that even though we may not agree on everything, I still value your opinion, I still value your vote, and I want you to use it.
I think they got it.
Politicians got it right.
Yeah.
I'm essentially a former politician. So.
Other questions?
Oh, come on.
Well, look, yeah, those are hard questions. I think you've spoken to, I'm thinking about the positioning of Michigan business and all of this, and to your point on what's internal with employees, et cetera. Do you think there's space for more collaboration in the business community on these issues in particular, and whether it's knowledge sharing or more jointly engaging publicly? What do you feel like the appetite is right now?
Well, frankly, that's why organizations like ours exist, why your organization, Leadership Now, exists. Everyone's time is so overbooked. If you're a CEO, or even if you're not a CEO, but you're working in a business or any kind of enterprise, the amount of challenges coming at you, your pattern is so full that it's just an impossibility to handle all of the. Again, I keep saying this, when the public square comes to visit you in your place of work. So, organizations like ours, or similar, or nonprofits, business associations, industry groups. That's what they play a really important role, because they can kind of take on that mantle and make it easier for the businesses. Again, why I appreciated the partnership with the secretary and her team was that they gave us tools to talk about the election and how to get engaged, how to vote, what the rules are, very factual in kind of nice pre-done pieces, and that we could get that out to the business community, and that was a great service.
And I think it's one of the reasons why we have seen turnout continue to go up, because of the partnerships we've made. I've also found, we look at it in terms of getting information out, engaging the public, helping to build a sort of informed, engaged citizenry, that there's only so much that elected officials can do. We can get the content, we can say this is how it works, give you all the trusted information, but we're not always the best messenger, and you often are. And that's one of the most important ways that business leaders have been really critical components of our strengthening democracy over these last several years. Faith leaders as well, and academic institutions, educators, trusted voices in your respected communities that are outside of the traditional political arena. And I think it becomes even more powerful if you don't agree with the folks that you're giving the information to on particular political issues, because you're again saying, like, no matter how you vote, I want you to vote because I value you and your opinion and your voice. And so all of that, I think, being the messenger and then figuring out the best way to deliver that message, which is an evolving thing. How are people getting their information? Is it social media? Is it face-to-face conversations? Is it on the plant floor? Is it in correspondence and meetings and the like? All of that isn't in the classroom. So figuring out the where, we always say in our department, like our job is to give you the what. We give you the content. You are the trusted voices that can get it out. And we all collectively have to figure out the how, the where. Where is the best place to get information to people? And that's an evolving, and I think that's continually evolving as various different other things shift. But all of those things I think we can try to solve together. And as we head into what will be not just this fall, but another storm in 2028. Hopefully at that point, I'm always optimistic that then we're going to be done and democracy will be saved, we'll be good to go after 28. But at the same time, we don't know. And again, I went into 2020, as my team remembers, like every week after the election, from between the election to the certification, we just were like, surely this is the end. Surely this is the end. And that's why that advice from Commissioner Tagliabue was so prescient when he said, you've got to stop looking at it like that. You have to see this as the beginning. So all that to say is we have our battles ahead of us, but we're battle tested and ready to go. But it is going to take all of us staying engaged, because the biggest threat ultimately would be disengagement, giving up. But if we stay engaged and determined to combat the challenges together, we can continue to grow our democracy and be that one of the best states in the country for fair and healthy elections.
Well, final round of questions. You know, if we look to, this is an ultimate problem that we're looking at where business and government can work together to solve. And we launched this business plan for America, which we've shared, because we thought there were so many challenges that we needed business and government to work effectively on together going forward, whether it's affordability of housing and energy, or AI and kind of navigating that, or elections or otherwise. And I just wondered, beyond, I'm going to assume that with this collaboration, 2026 is going to be a safe and secure election in Michigan, and there will be, you know, a new set of political leaders coming in. And, you know, maybe I'll start with you, Peter. What's on your wish list of things that business and government can work effectively on together after 26?
At the state level, I mean, we just would love to see fidelity towards a set of KPIs, right? I mean, and really just a demand from the business community and from the broader public to say, hey, you know, education, like, what we're doing isn't working, right? If we're spending more money and we're getting worse results and there's an inverse correlation there, well, let's figure out how we can actually turn that around, and let's have some humility. I spend a lot of time working in Ohio right now, and as a Michigander, it absolutely erodes my soul to see how they are kicking ass and taking names on the economic development side of the house, right? So I think getting back to that sense of humility, let's be willing to take best practices from others as opposed to riding on the backs of best practices from a decade or a decade and a half ago. But I would love to see just less of an adversarial relationship and more of an appreciation that business leaders can offer not only a moderating effect on policy, but even where they may not agree. And I valued the relationship with folks that I knew. I was not going to be voting the way that they wanted me to vote, to be very clear, but I wanted to be able to factor in and incorporate their feedback, because maybe they would give a perspective that I wouldn't otherwise be able to have. And I think some of the strongest politicians that I know on either side of the aisle have those relationships and are able to say, hey, you know, I saw this issue come up. Let me call this person in my district that I know knows a lot about it. They don't vote for me, but they will be able to give me candid feedback that I can then be positioned to make the best possible decision. So I think just having business leaders, and again, the CEOs have their lobbying teams that are going to be able to connect in if they're on the Fortune 500. I'm not talking about them. I mean the small and medium enterprises that are scattered throughout the state that form the base of our industrial base, making sure that they feel compelled and that they should strike up those relationships with their state representatives, their state senators, the members of Congress. You may not be meeting every week, you may not be meeting every month, but when that issue arises, to be that trusted voice, that trusted ear that they can, you know, run something by, I think there's tremendous value in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the I was thinking two things right before you were sharing that, and then as you were talking. I mean, one, I completely agree that workforce development, talent retention, and ensuring public education excellence in the state of Michigan is critical to ensuring we grow our economy. And I think that, and we know from a lot of the conversations we're going to be having over the next few days here and beyond, that ensuring our education system is one that truly guarantees that everyone is college or career ready upon graduation is necessary to growing our economy. And then looking to how we take that workforce that we've developed in partnership with employers and others around the state to grow our economy, diversify our economy, and all the rest. But the interesting thing is that as we were talking, I realized a lot of the reasons what business leaders engaging in democracy does is engage you in building the trust with leaders in government so that we can partner on everything else that we need to partner on. Because we know if you're helping to engage at the foundation of everything, our democracy, that grows the engagement and everything else. And then the second thing to me that I've seen is the way we've actually made government work well, which is necessary to building trust and keeping people engaged. The way we've been actually to transform our Department of State and take what was the butt of jokes for an inefficient customer service agency that touched everyone in the state through our delivery of services and did it really poorly. We've now transformed that so we do it really well. We did three things. Number one, we talked to our employees. We listened to them, and turns out they had the vast majority of good ideas that we needed to start implementing change. But the second thing we did was look to other states. What are other states doing better? Indiana, frankly, was where we got a lot of ideas from. And we brought self-service stations from a company rooted there to Michigan because we noticed that some people were actually on the border, choosing to have their driver's license in Indiana just because it was easier to get it there, right? So it's very analogous to what we're seeing on the economy side. So if we're taking those best practices from other states, that actually is what we did to transform our customer service. And the third thing we did was talk to business leaders. Patty Poppy of Consumers Energy. She was the head of Consumers Energy at the time. I sat down with her and I said, you have a customer-facing entity. What are you doing? What are you seeing? Where's the innovation? Because what I found was really effective, and you all know this, is that you are on the forefront of innovative ideas. You have to be to grow your business and to ensure the profit-driven returns and everything else that you're seeking. And so what we were able to do is lean on the innovation that several private entities and business leaders were already looking at in a customer-facing industry, like whether it's public utilities or banking, take those ideas and apply that, or some, it was not just ideas, some of it was just culture improvements within the office. How can we take those ideas from private business and implement them to make government work well? Those three things were how we transformed our Department of State. And I think that same type of approach, looking at best practices, leaning on the business community, saying, what are you seeing? What can we do better in the state with that humility? And then third, listening to our employees as well. Bringing all that together, we can transform any antiquated state agency and make it work well. And I know it because I've taken one of the worst and made it one of the best. So working together, we can do that across the board.
Awesome. Sandy, this is core to your job, obviously, finding those intersections between business and government. What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, listen, the business community has to play an outsized role in kind of charting Michigan's trajectory forward. We have some unique challenges in this state. We have tremendous assets to build on. I mean, just look around, right? We're a beautiful state. We have a high quality of life. We've got great people. My peers across the country are still shocked that I've got 13 Fortune 500 companies headquartered in my backyard that I have the honor of representing. But, we're last in GDP growth. We're second to last in population growth. We used to be a top 20 state in student proficiency. We're now in the bottom 10. Per capita income, we used to be in the top 20. Now we're in the bottom 10. And that has happened just in the last 25 years. So that's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. We've had Democratic governors. We've had Republican governors, Democratic legislators, legislatures, and Republican ones, and trifecta splits all around, throughout that time over the last 25 years. So, we have so much to build upon, but we have so much work to do.
And if we're not serious about it, if we're not organized about it, when Bob Riney and I kick off the conference formally in the theater in just a couple hours here, we're going to be talking about this. We're going to be hanging a lantern on it and saying that, hey, our house is on fire, but what's the fix? Right? We've got to figure out what the fix is, and how do we find a fix that is both acceptable to Democrats and Republicans, because the Michigan U-turn is not just a traffic pattern in Michigan. It is kind of our policy practice. We do something for a while, and and then it. And then we change our minds, or the political winds change, and that's just no way to run any kind of entity, including a state, long term. One of my political heroes, Ronald Reagan, said, I have an 80% rule. If I'm negotiating with someone and, or the other side, the other party, if I can get 80% of what I want, they can get 80% of what they want, I'm going to call that a win. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not going to go back and try to get the 20 that I left on the table some other day, but let's take the 80% as a win if that creates some sort of long-term solution.
Well, and on that note, Megan also said something that I quote often, which is, you can get a lot done if you don't care who gets the credit.
Yep, that's
that
right.
I think is really critical as well to creating that stability and getting things done. To just be like, you know what, if you guys need to take the win on this, great, let's get it done.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, just to finish up, to be practical, we'll put on the screen. Let's see if I need to put. Oh,
I think you got it.
Let's see. It's the. We have some resources for businesses and business leaders around. Here we go. There's a QR code if you'd like it. We can give it to you afterwards as well. Just how to protect elections from a business perspective. These are national. They're applicable in different states. I'm sure there'll be state-specific resources as well that will complement this, and we'll start providing links to that here. But we wanted to give some practical roadmap. As much as I think there is confidence that the elections will ultimately be secure, it's interesting to me that one of our most downloaded memos in the last year was a memo on election risks, what business leaders need to know. I think there is just concern and uncertainty, and just trying to kind of create clarity. Here's what's going to happen. Here's how it can be protected, I think is what all of you have done and what we can all do as we approach the election. And I really want to sincerely thank all of you for being on this panel. I mean, you've made me hopeful. I think it's a great sign for the state of Michigan that there's leaders like you across sectors working not only to make our election safe, but to make the economy stronger and the state stronger. And I think it's hopeful for the whole country. So thank you again for your leadership, and thanks for all of you being here.
Great. Thanks, everyone.